So now let's take a look at how we can create a generic method. And again, this isn't going to be extremely useful at this point until we are able to restrict the generic method. And I will show you how to do that next. But first, let's just look at the basic syntax of this, and you will just going to have to bear with me here to see that this example will show you how to do this, but it's not going to really give you a lot of value yet. So let's create a method that is going to allow us to print using a different print cartridge than what the printer is configured with. If you remember, we made our printer be able to take a type and then be the type of the cartridge. But let's say we want to have a print method that would print, you could specify a cartridge. Think about inserting a cartridge just for a temporary print. So one thing that we need to do when we declare our generic method is we need to specify what the generic is going to be right here after the public, before the type, before the return type. So I'm going to use a different letter here. I'm going to do U here instead of T, because we're already using T in our class to make this a separate type. And this U is only going to exist for this method. It's not going to exist outside of here. The T exists in all the methods. It's the type that's defined for that class. But this U is going to exist just for this method indication. So you could call this method multiple times and pass in different type for U. Then we are just going to declare our method. We are going to call this print using cartridge. And then we are going to say it's of type U, whatever the type that you want to use, and we will call this cartridge. And then we will have a string which will be our message to print. And then we will go ahead and just sandwich our message in between our cartridge, which is toString here. So we will make two of these, and then we will make it so that we'll print out message in between here. So let's take a look at how we can actually use this. This is the basic syntax. We have our type, and then you are passing in the type of the parameter. So let's see if we actually call it this. Instead of calling print, we are going to call print using cartridge. And then we are going to do a different cartridge than what our printer is. We are going to do a new color cartridge. Then we will pass in the message hi. And one thing that you will notice here with the method is it auto-infers what the type is. So I didn't specify the type. I didn't do this. I didn't say a color cartridge because I don't need to do, because Java is smart enough. The compiler is smart enough to figure out that. Okay, if you pass it in the type of color cartridge here, then this U, I'm going to replace this with color cartridge. And so everywhere in the code where I see U, I'm going to use color cartridge instead. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. You can see here we are actually using the color cartridge because it printed the color, the toString for color, and then it printed our hi and then color again. And so we have auto-inferred this type. We have our generic method, and our generic method is using whatever type we pass in here. And now before we get into actually using the bounding to make it so that we restrict our type, I'm going to show you why we are going to need to do this real quick here. So in this method, there is nothing that's stopping us from doing something like this. You see, 3 is a type of integer. It's a type. So when we get to our print using cartridge, this U is going to be integer, our big integer, because this is the boxed version of an integer, because it has to be an object. So now we are going to be using an integer here, which is not a type of cartridge at all. So if I run this now, you can see it's printing 3, which is very strange. It doesn't make much sense here. So it will take any type here, basically any class. I mean, we can even do something silly like passing our own reference to printer. And you can see here it prints out the actual class like the memory of that printer. So we have got a bit of a problem here, and I'm going to show you how to solve this